Today I'm going to show you what the average savings of every age group looks like in the UK. We're going to look at a few different types of wealth together, and by understanding how the average Brit collects and stores their wealth, how they organise it, I hope to show you that from any starting point, you can be so much better than average.
I'm about average.
How big is average?
Average is 1.74 children, 0.5 dogs, and 1.2 tattoos that you 100.0 so regret. Especially that one you got in Thailand that time that you thought said your son's name, but now you're not sure anymore. Anyway, averages are a bit like that foreign tattoo. So they might look good, they might make you feel good, but when you examine them a little bit closer, they tend not to make much sense. So to accommodate for this, I want to show you a few different averages today, so that we can look at this from a few different angles. I've got 9 dice here. Here they are. If I roll all of these out and I say, what is the average? You might go, okay, well, let's first of all just line them all up in an order, because that looks prettier. We'll add them together, divide them by the total amount of dice, and we'll get the mean average. The problem with the mean average is the presence of a few high numbers seriously impacts the mean. The mean average salary in the UK is £42,210, but Denise Coates last year paid herself a salary of £221 million. This is going to have a significant impact on the mean figure, as that's 5,235.7 people for just one Denise. A better measure of the average then might instead be, okay, what's the median here? What's the middle value? Because what that does is it eliminates the impact of extreme examples at the ends. Neither the mean or the median is perfect, so I'm going to show you both so that we can draw different points from both data sets. Here are our different age categories, and here along the top are the different types of wealth that we're going to discuss together. Let's start with the first category, physical wealth.
All right, let's go shopping.
In 1993, the UN sent 30 photographers to different countries to take some pictures. These pictures. They show a typical family from that country stood outside their house with every physical item they own. We have the Natoma family of Mali, the Abdullah family of Kuwait. This American family, unsurprisingly, have more stuff than any of the others. But it is this picture that is my favourite, because Mr. Castello Balderas sits here with everything he holds dear in the world, and he gives his TV more sofa space than his 5 family members. A 30-year-old reminder of the value we place on stuff. Physical wealth is the stuff we own. So it's the cars we drive, the clothes we wear, the technology that owns us. Every item, every possession in your life lined up outside, what is that worth? The answer for the median individual in the UK is this. So what can we take from this data? Well, the average 20 to 24-year-old having 7 to 8K's worth of stuff is a bit mental. This represents well over 50% of their total net worth. Why? Maybe it's because in the modern world, luxury items of the past are now everyday essentials. I mean, £1,000 phone, anyone? Just one example. You could point to the fact as well that this cohort are more likely to spend money on luxury goods. But question for you then, if we took these pictures again today, what would you expect to see? The narrative is that we're accumulating stuff at an alarming rate, more than twice as much stuff as we had 50 years ago. But then just look at how the amount of physical wealth stops growing meaningfully beyond our 30s. If we input the mean figures next to these, we see the same trend. The mean figures are higher, which shows the impact of wealth. The mean figures are always going to be higher because of that impact. But the growth again sort of plateaus in the same way. It's the only wealth bracket where we see this trend. In all the other types of wealth, they grow as we get older. If we were collecting more and more stuff, wouldn't we see that in this number? The data which is presented and collected by Nimble Fins is an estimation of individual wealth. So maybe the fact that we partner up in later life means that we don't see this number rise because the household wealth in physical items is shared amongst 2 individuals. The thing about this physical wealth data is, and how it's reported, is that it's self-reporting. As in, they ask people, how much do you think all of your stuff is worth? How much is your pension worth is a question with a very definite answer. What's the value of all of your material possessions? That's a whole different ballgame. What's the value of this bike to the Natomo family? How important is this radio to the lad of Vales versus this one to the Caven family? Would Mr. Balderas rather give up a kid or that TV? If you're in your early 20s and all you have is a phone and a few bits of clothing to your name, you're likely to overestimate how much that stuff is worth. The IKEA effect is the observed bias that we place a higher value on furniture that we've partly built ourselves. I hate to break it to you, but no one is buying your Billy bookcase. And your phone might be worth 500 quid. But let's say we sell it right now. What are you doing then? You're going to go out and buy another one straight away. That's not wealth. Look at this image one last time of the American family. They're the ones with the most physical wealth. And consider please that every item proudly on display here, besides the books and probably the kids, are today broken, worn out, redundant, obsolete, valueless. Wealth grows in value over time. Most stuff does the opposite. As we grow older, do we place less value and importance on the stuff in our lives? And that's why we see a flat line in the self-reporting data. I know that it's probably just that once we have a home and we filled it with stuff, we stop buying as much stuff. But, I'm the kind of guy that will get a sentimental tattoo on a lad's holiday. So I'm just trying to find a bit of emotion in the data here if I can. But anyway, let's move on, shall we? And look at a biggie, property. Have you ever seen one of these? It's a rather lovely example of a barometer. They're meant to tell you the weather. This was my nan's. She used to tap on it and then announce if it was going to rain or not that day. The thing is, she didn't trust the weatherman. She used this to know if she needed to water her garden or not. She didn't get the internet either. Teletext was just fine. She liked pickling things and talking about house prices. My nan, like I will be one day, was a product of the environment that she grew up in, just like this table right here. You might look at this and go, well, this follows a pretty sensible path. The median 20-year-old has no property wealth because they don't own a home. And then at some point in their 30s, that median person gets on the ladder and their property wealth grows over time from there. But the property market that allowed the median 65-plus-year-old to be where they are today looked very different to the one younger generations face now. The desire is the same, to own a home that you then fill with IKEA furniture that you think's worth more than it actually is because you built it with your own bare hands. But the route to getting there is as alien to each other as this barometer is to a modern day weather forecast. 50% of baby boomers owned a home by 30 years old. We now know that only 30% of millennials achieve home ownership by 30. The property market where you live is one of the key factors in deciding if you can afford to buy a home or not. The price to earnings ratios vary a lot across the UK, something that average data often forgets to mention. But there is another factor that is very of the time. Your mortgage expert reports that 57% of first-time buyers have assistance from the bank of mum and dad. We can see this impact in the mean figures. Every age group now has property wealth, even though the majority of 20-year-olds don't own a home. Such is the impact of wealth on the mean average. But interestingly, those in the 25 to 29 category have a higher amount of property wealth than those above them. Since 2019, the amount given by Bank of Mum and Dad has almost doubled, and I think that's what we see right here. The inheritocracy, as Dr. Elizabeth Philby calls it. You should not feel bad about getting family assistance. My mum didn't help me, but I'm going to help my son get onto the ladder when the time comes, I think. But family assistance comes down to luck. It's a roll of the genetic dice, if you will. If we fast forward 30 years, I suspect the amount of equity held by the median person in the UK will look very different, if not non-existent. I recently interviewed one of the heads of investment for Nest Pensions on my podcast, and he said this.
The majority of our members are in rented accommodation and will continue to be in rented accommodation into retirement.
They have 13 million clients and they're sitting there going, they expect that the majority of them will be renters. The property market is a barometer of the way attitudes towards finances in this country need to change.
What we want to see is what I've called a property-owning democracy.
The political landscape has pushed this idea of home ownership for 100 years now. This idea of a property-owning democracy. And while I wish that politicians had delivered on their promise, the truth is that right now, as we sit here, it's basically never been harder to actually buy that first home. So I doubt the situation will improve anytime soon. The important question is then, what do we do about it as individuals? We can't just sit here waiting for things to improve. We have to work with the financial landscape, that's given to us, and we have to look for ways to thrive within it. My nan pickled things to preserve them because she lived through the war. And she liked property and house prices because she bought a house in the 60s and then rode a massive property trend to a position of financial security. These events and themes dominated her life and then shaped the way that she viewed the world. So what is a more of-the-time view towards housing, if you will? I want to stress that this is very much up to the individual. It's your choice if you want to buy a home or not, and it is a choice. But I'll give you my broad thoughts for both homeowners and non-homeowners. Let's start with homeowners first. Between 1952 and 2024, the average UK property went up in value by 151 times. But just because it did that in the past doesn't mean that it will do it again. If it did, the average house would be worth 43 million in 71 years. Higher valuations today lead to lower expected returns in the future. This is a pretty basic rule of investing, and I think it would be wise for people who are homeowners today to sort of acknowledge this fact, that we're unlikely to see the levels of growth that we've seen in the past in the property market. Prices will go up. I made a whole video on this, but I'll link it in the end cards for you. But there's a shift that needs to happen here in the UK amongst homeowners, in that people need to start seeing their home as just a home, as security, as shelter. It's the iPhone thing all over again, plugged in on charge. But yeah, you could sell that for £500, but then you need to buy another one straight away. You can sell your home for whatever it's worth, but then what are you going to do? You're going to go live in a tent in a car park? You're going to need to buy another home. Home ownership is only part of the story, and I hope the modern homeowner turns their attention for wealth generation to assets that are better suited for it. I dream of a world where people discuss how much their stock portfolio has gone up or what contributions are being matched on their pension, not just how much house prices have risen. Okay, what about if you don't own a home?
You got to buy a home. Push your finances to the extreme to buy a home. Renting is a dirty word.
This table shows the amount of time it takes to save for a deposit if you're single or in a relationship in different parts of the UK. The regional differences are massive, as I mentioned before, but the takeaway is the same. If you're single, it is difficult to get on the ladder. And if you're in Greater London, should you spend 15 years saving for a property if you're single? Owning a home at retirement is a sensible goal because it relieves the pressure on your retirement savings. But you don't have to own that home from the age of 20, especially when we know that if we settle down with someone or are earning more as we tend to as we get older, it becomes a lot easier to actually save. So maybe instead reorder your priorities and focus on other types of assets where small amounts really can grow to large sums because of the effects of time, which is something that you'll never have more of than you do today. Home ownership can still be on the cards, but it's not the only card that you can play. I know the property market is a major source of stress and anxiety for those who feel left out of it. Your life will change radically over a 10-year period, and potentially so will your ability to buy a home. If you're sat there feeling despondent about the housing market, thinking that home ownership is not for you, I actually think that these generations coming up now have an opportunity in front of them to set themselves up in a way that the people ahead of them never did. Let me show you what I median. That was a pretty average joke. Number 3, pension wealth. Here are the median figures, and they look low across the board. The mean figures are of course significantly higher, as you can see here. But let's focus on the median numbers, as 50% of people are below this figure. But let's go through each age group in turn, and I'll show you why I think the picture isn't as bleak as it might look at first glance with these median numbers. I know that half of the population is below this number though, but hopefully what I'm about to discuss applies to anyone anywhere on the scale at the minute, because I firmly believe that with a bit of effort, everyone can have a good retirement. So at the top, in the 20s, especially the 20 to 24-year-olds, their pension is most likely a work-based auto-enrolment scheme. They haven't worked for very long, and they don't earn that much either, so they don't have that much in it. The key thing is, they're in a scheme, and they will likely remain in a scheme for their whole working lives. The opportunity then for people in this age group who are younger, who feel that maybe, they're being left out of the housing market, is the fact that the auto-enrolment scheme for them kicks in as soon as they start working, basically. And what that means is over a lifetime, they'll probably have a bigger pension pot than some of the people that are ahead of them in terms of age. Let's say you pay in £100 a month into your pension in total after your contributions and the employer match, and you do that from the age of 25 until 68. And someone does the exact same, £100 a month every single month, but they start at 35 and they go to 68. Both achieve the same level of return of 7% a year. The 25-year-old will have contributed for 43 years and paid in £51,600, which includes that employer match, and they'll have about £308,000 at the end. The 35-year-old will have paid in £39,000 and have £148k at the end, half the amount. That's the cost of those 10 years in this example. So I just want to put a question to the average 20-something-year-old. Should you spend 15 years pissing into the wind to try and save enough money to buy a one-bed flat above a chicken shop in Zone 4 London somewhere? Or should you wait until you have a partner to start focusing on this goal of home ownership, as it makes it much easier, as we know? And instead go, hold on, A small amount extra into my pension savings will make a massive difference long term due to my age. I can't fix the housing market for you, I wish I could. But there's so many things to be positive about when it comes to wealth generation at your age because you have more time than anyone else. So just use it. If we move up the age range to 40 years old, this also applies to those in their 50s. This group potentially missed out on generous defined benefit schemes of the past and also have not been auto-enrolled their whole career, so may have missed out on years of retirement savings. It's hard to run these figures 100% accurately because we're talking about a fictitious Mr. and Mrs. Median, if you will. But using all the data that we have available to us, the median wage for a 40 to 49-year-old in the UK is roughly £42,000. And the general recommendation for that salary is that they should be withdrawing about roughly 60% of that in retirement, which is about £25,000. If I plug these figures in for people in their 40s, based on contributions of about 8%, in both cases we can see that they're going to fall short of their goal by about £5,000 a year. The good news here is though, there's still lots of time. I get people all the time in my comments like, oh, I'm starting really late, I'm 41, 44. You're not late. You're likely established in your career with a good level of earnings compared to, say, your 20s. You're more financially mature and responsible, and you have decades ahead of you before retirement. This is the perfect age to kind of grab this by the horns. For anyone who feels this way, that they are late, I've included a video in the end cards that looks at this topic in more detail for you. Right, in your 50s, let's first of all dispel a myth. Hardly anyone retires early in their 50s. This orange line here are the people who say that they're retired in their 50s and they're not in work. It sits below 10% until after 55 and doesn't cross over 20% until 60 years old. In general here, the median figures are low, and they're probably more concerning because of the lack of time ahead of this cohort to save up for retirement. But there is probably an element as well of people drawing on their pensions, taking their tax-free lump sum and stuff, and that could be affecting these median numbers. If we take the £89,000 median pension pot of the between 55 to 59-year-olds though, and we assume a 6% growth rate until retirement at age 66, so 11 years, and they put in £300 a month, that would get them to £227,000. Add a partner to that with the same amount, and then add 2 state pensions, and you've got over £40,000 a year in retirement. What this age group has going for them is certainty really about state pension. They can be confident that the state pension will exist for them in a meaningful way. People my age, 40 or below, we don't have that certainty. They also likely have higher disposable incomes as they've got rid of expensive things like children. And they have this incentive just to throw money into their pensions because they can access it sooner. People in their 20s, it's quite abstract and they're locking the money away for decades. Whereas people in their 50s, you get your hand on it round the corner, so you might as well. Finally, in the 60s, we see the number decline beyond 65 as people spend their pension pots. But a median income of about £127,000 just before retirement will kick off about 5k a year in retirement income. If your partner had the same and you have 2 state pensions, then you are getting some sort of security in retirement. But I do think we need to tackle this narrative that people of this age group and above all had generous defined benefit schemes. It's not the case. And as we can see, 50% of this cohort are going to have below this amount in retirement savings. While I am trying to make people feel upbeat about their pensions here, I want everyone to feel good about their finances. I think you should. I think you deserve to. And I don't think there's any reason for mass panic all of the time. Sometimes a little bit of panic, but not today. I do think, if you're in this position and you've got less than this median figure at this age, there's a limited amount of time ahead of you. And what you're probably going to need to do is look at it and go, I might need to continue working in some way, shape or form to supplement my income if I want the retirement that I want. Every stage of the pension age group faces their own opportunities and risks when it comes to this topic. But I do think as part of the shifting attitudes of the UK population, this need to stop obsessing over property and start looking at other things. The best advice for all age groups is just to get really into your pensions. Who are they with? Where is that money being invested? What are the fees and how are those funds performing? Is there a better fund for you that you could pick maybe? And then look at your employer. What are they offering in terms of pensions? How generous is their contribution and are you maximising that contribution? And can you just afford to put a couple of extra quid a week into your pension? Let's get as excited about pensions as we do about property. Yay, pensions. Let's move on to the next category, shall we? Financial wealth, which includes investments like ISAs, endowments, stocks and shares, as well as cash in the bank. Pari passu is a Latin phrase that means equal footing or without preference. Well, I think it does, but I got priors with poor translation. But it's a term that's commonly used in finance or contract law where multiple parties or financial assets are ranked equally or without preference. When I look at the financial wealth category of the median person in the UK, it becomes very clear that there is no pari passu here. Financial wealth is a massive category, so it's your easy access wealth is one way to think about it. It's your emergency funds, your stocks and shares ISA, cash in the bank, premium bonds. Think of it as being crucial because it's the kind of wealth that you run to if you really need the money. Every age group demonstrates a weakness in their financial security here. The median 30 to 34-year-old has all this wealth, but wouldn't be able to handle missing 1 month's pay from work. That doesn't feel like sure footing. The median 25 to 29-year-old has 11,348 quid's worth of stuff, but minus £56 in the bank, which is a nod to their level of debt. Maybe the presence of a partner in a household, because these are estimated individual amounts, makes up for these figures, so they make the resilience to emergencies look better. But it's also clear from these numbers that the majority of the UK are not taking advantage of tax-efficient accounts like stocks and shares ISAs. 6% of adults in the UK have a stocks and shares ISA. If you want to be in rare company, just open a stocks and shares ISA account and pay £1 in. A pension is probably, on paper, the most efficient retirement vehicle for almost anyone. But the ISA gives you control over when you actually use it. So in this landscape of where retirement age just slowly gets jacked up over time, the ISA allows you to go, I'm stopping work here and I'm going to live off those funds until my pension kicks in. Also, a combination of pension and ISA in retirement allows you to be really tax efficient in terms of the income that you draw. We do see a big kick up here at 60 to 65 with how much cash is on hand. I think this is normal because this age group moved from accumulation of assets to decumulation of assets. And having large, easy access cash buffers is a common way of mitigating against falls in the stock market. But what these figures say to me is the middle person, and as such half the UK population, live in a position of financial weakness, where a shock or unexpected cost will potentially derail them. And here now are the total figures for all categories. The quick amongst you will have noticed that this total does not equal the same as these numbers added together. This is because the sum of the medians does not equal the median of the sums. I'll leave an explanation to that in the description below so I don't have to get my dice out again. And here is the total mean data if you want to pause and have a look at that. Wherever you are on this lineup, below the average or above it, younger or older, it doesn't matter. Here on screen is a breakdown of the age range of people that watch this channel. We're an eclectic bunch, and here is what my financial chart looked like in my 20s due to some very poor financial decisions. That changed for me not because I earned more money or because I did what my nan said. It was because I actively engaged in my finances and made conscious decisions about where I wanted them to go. By sitting here today with me, you're making those same steps. You're sitting down to determine where you want your finances to be, what you want them to look like, and most importantly, what you want them to say, not letting someone else do it for you. That not only makes you better than average, it puts you in very small company indeed. Most people in the UK shape their financial futures based on outdated dogma. My home is my retirement, pensions are a scam, the stock market is too risky and cash is king. These beliefs are sort of etched into the minds of many, like a tattoo from the past that translates poorly in today's world. Right, I've been going on about this tattoo for a good 20 minutes now, so I best show you. It's on my foot. I'm going to shout now because the mic's over there. I won't get my full foot out because it's a size 13 and I've got finger toes. And while they're good for building flat pack from IKEA, all those extra digits, no one needs to see them. But could anyone tell me what that scrawl on the side of my foot means there? Can you see it? You can barely read it. It's just really wonky and all sorts. I don't know, maybe what I need to do is get another tattoo like it on this foot so I'm in equal footing. Pari passu.